Hi everyone, Tooth and Shoes Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this Peter Gabriel album, I.O. Yep, this is the 10th LP and the first in over 20 years of new and original material, front to back, from art pop and art rock pioneer and actually based humanitarian, heck yeah, Peter frickin' Gabriel. Dropped at the very tail end of last year, took a minute, I'm just now getting to it, I apologize. And of course I was kind of skeptical going into this because you are talking about an artist whose creative prime is well behind him at this point. Peter wouldn't be the only artist of his generation to drop some mid over the last 5 years. But hear me out when I say this is a surprisingly interesting album, a kind of weird and special LP from a rare talent. Because first off, we are talking about one of the pioneers of progressive rock as we know it, with him being the first frontman of the legendary band Genesis, a group that he also had the mind to jump ship on before that went downhill to embark on a stellar solo career in which he's dropped at least some fire in every era he's been active. And speaking of eras, this record spans a couple, with some of the material or recordings going all the way back to the 90s. Music theorist brainiac Brian Eno was also involved in the production side of this LP. There's a lot of talent in the liner notes of this record, including familiar faces that Peter has been collaborating with for years, like bass great Tony Levin. And look, mixing, engineering, that is a topic I'm a bit of a nut about. It's something I maybe indulge in too much in some of my reviews, and I feel like I'm being pushed to do that more than ever here, considering there are multiple versions of this album with different mixes. But most importantly, the standard CD version of the album that features a bright side and dark side mix, which we don't really get a whole lot of instruction on why we're getting them and what makes them different. I don't know if there's an idea or perception or artistic approach that kind of guides the overall sound of each mix. I did notice overall the dark side mixes are a bit drier and seem to have more breathing room, and I think they're the better for it. The song Olive Tree, for example, especially on the chorus, is nowhere near as overbearing and deafening with verb as it is on the bright side mix. And again, while I may prefer that side of the record, the bright side mixes have their strengths too, like the string sections on Playing for Time, which come across much more pillowy and warm. It's very storybook, which I think has an appeal to it. But yeah, this is the kind of thing that I personally find very intriguing, though I could imagine for your average listener, this is a very convoluted way to release a record. And I didn't even get into the fact that Peter released every single song on this album over the past year in accordance with the full moon that month. So yeah, there's a lot of background and lore to this LP, further details and information on Peter Gabriel's YouTube channel at the moment too. So with all this hullabaloo, you have to wonder, is the music itself even good? Is it a high watermark or a late stage disappointment from an artist who is coasting on their legacy? Well, it's definitely not a lazy album, I can certainly say that, though I'm not sure I would consider it to be up there with some of the definitive Twilight Years records we've caught over the past decade from Scott Walker or David Bowie. Though Gabriel does a pretty good job of delivering songs that are passionate, are detailed, and come from a deep love of humanity and the world. And also more in the darkness of the modern era a bit too. Not to mention many of the vocal performances surpass the expectations you might have for a man in his 70s. Let's start with the opener, which might not be my favorite track here, but I do think it'll give you a good sense as to whether or not this record is going to do anything for you. The instrumental does sound a little dated, but at least that sound is specific to Peter Gabriel. It's a big acoustic rock anthem with some gigantic drums and synth passages. Over this, Peter sings ominously about the presence of what seems like an information state, with phones recording all things going on around us, and he kind of presents a both sides argument to this change in culture, pointing out that doing this can be a means of spreading important information, dispelling lies, but simultaneously these same mechanisms can be used for disinformation purposes and also become this all-seeing eye around us. Which, fair point, but I just wish Peter had better lyrics to apply to this paradigm outside of you face the mother lode and tentacles all around you, which is one of many instances where I think Peter's words are maybe just a bit too on the nose. The vibes get even more paranoid on the Following the Court, which, how could it not, with its themes of judgment and controlled data, as well as your only memories being on your phone. The song also features one of the best instrumentals on the record, with all of this great hand percussion, heavy hits of bass and piano. It's funky as well as grim at the same time. Some of the aesthetic touches on the song also call back to Peter's artistic peaks in the 80s. Playing for Time sees a shift into a spotlit piano ballad. It's a little Elton, a little Randy Newman, a little Disney too, but not in a bad way. And being a man of experience, of course, Peter Gabriel is meditating on the idea of time on this track. How much has passed? How much is left? And between the vocal performance and the writing, I think this is one of the most moving cuts on this topic I've heard in a minute, even if the whole thing does sound super big budget. Then we have the title track, which I admire the sentiment of. It's a full-on rejection of this increasing sense of societal isolation, really pointing out the false notion that people can just survive entirely by themselves without connections to others, connections to the world that made them. And by contrast, Peter embraces the world around him by saying that he's just a part of everything. Now again, another moment on the record where I think lyrically he is just going a bit too simple. Some of the verses read like something out of a children's song. It's not quite Raffi Baby Beluga level, but there are parts of the writing that leaves something to be desired and comes across a little infantile, even if I can't appreciate a man in his 70s having some sense of childlike wonder. We get another beautiful, dramatic, and heart-wrenching ballad on Four Kinds of Horses. Then there's Road to Joy, which is the biggest banger on this record by a mile, really reigniting that classic, groovy, big-time art pop anthem vibe from the So era. But then from here we move into a kind of weak second half for the album. The instrumental on Olive Tree really sounds like a jubilee, especially with those bass lines and horns, but there's something missing on the vocal side of the track for me, especially on the chorus, that just doesn't see Peter sounding as joyous and as upbeat as the song kind of implies. The track Love Can Heal is another moment on the record that, while I do appreciate the emotion and the message of the track, Peter embracing love, forgiveness, oneness with the world, it doesn't really feel like a song as much as it feels kind of like a motif, a vague musical moment, as opposed to a fully fleshed out song, which throws off the momentum of the track list, especially at this length. Plus, the production presents the sound palette of a mid-90s new age relaxation tape. And look, even if guys like Peter Gabriel and Brian Eno were key in the crafting of these vibes and sounds and aesthetics that we are hearing on tracks like this, the fact of the matter is, at this point in 2023, 2024, they are super dated and are not quite hitting with the impact that they did at that time. Case in point, the following track, This Is Home, that at this point to me reads like a Bill Wirtz song, but now without like the aesthetic irony attached to all of the overly sanitary and synthetic textures. The pacing on And Still leaves a lot to be desired too. Some of the synthetic chorus effects on the vocals really take the humanity out of Peter's leads. And the closing track, I think, again, suffers from a lot of these same old, tired, dated aesthetic shortcomings. But now, in addition to this, we have some very sappy songwriting at play, which, again, in concept, I don't want to be overly cynical toward or negative toward. It just kind of feels like it comes from a place of out of touch idealism in a way that I guess is a tough sell for me, especially given that some of the instrumental bits and poetry come across as very plain. So it's for that reason I'm feeling a strong 5 to a light 6 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or a link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Peter Gabriel, forever.